Trump guns for Greenland.
Well, I don't think they're going to push back too much. Look, we have to have it. They have to have this done. They can't protect it.
US President puts Europe on notice.
Nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join.
Trump threatens Macron with tariffs. Macron's private message made public.
If anybody thinks that Norway doesn't control the Nobel Prize, they're just kidding.
Trump links Nobel to Greenland. Trump's ultimatum: give up Greenland. What comes next in Donroe Doctrine?
Welcome to this India Today special coming to you from the World Economic Forum in Davos here on a lovely, chilly but sunny afternoon. In a few hours from now, the weather could change because Donald Trump, the man the world is watching, arrives here in Davos to address the World Economic Forum tomorrow. And with Donald Trump, you never know what happens next. To decode Donald Trump and just why this is such a significant moment in global geopolitics and geoeconomics, I'm joined by one of the world's foremost foreign policy commentators, the host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS, author, columnist, and a friend. Fareed Zakaria, welcome to our special coverage here from Davos.
Great to see you, Rajdeep.
I must start by asking you, did you ever think a moment like this would come where the world's attention is so singularly fixated on one man? I had in the very chair that you were, the World Economic Forum President, Borge Brendan, yesterday, and he said this is the most complex and challenging geopolitical moment since 1945 and the Second World War. Do you concur?
I would put it this way. What Trump is doing, and the reason we do have to focus on him, is he is fundamentally reorienting, or he's trying to fundamentally reorient American foreign policy. American foreign policy since World War II has been remarkably consistent. Through Democrats, Republicans, through wars and peace, there has been pillars of consistency. Strong commitment to European security, strong commitment to Japan, South Korea, an effort to deter countries like Russia and China. All that is being upended. I mean, in a fundamental sense, you could say, Rajdeep, that the Trump doctrine seems to be fight with your allies and make up with your enemies. Think about whom he's fighting with. He's fighting with the Europeans. He's fighting with the Ukrainians. He's fighting with India, which for 25 years has been a close American partner. And he's constantly making overtures to Putin. He's showing enormous respect for Xi Jinping. Even his dealings with South Korea, he has enormous respect for Kim Jong-un. He talks about how he fell in love with him. So there's something kind of odd about Trump, which is, I sometimes think of it as the characteristic of a bully, right? A bully is somebody who takes advantage of somebody who's nice to them and in a strange way oddly respects the tough guy who's your adversary.
Is he a bully or something more than that? One of the foreign policy commentators I had yesterday, Gideon Rackman, says it's more like a mafia operation. There are those who are calling him transactional. There are others who are saying that there is a method to the madness. Is there a method to the madness? Is he transactional, just looking to cut a deal and perhaps, as some critics say, simply make a lot of money?
Look, there are all elements of that involved. But I do think the most important thing to understand is this is a very idiosyncratic man who has his own personal ideas, whims about what is good and bad, what makes the world work. And he just acts on them. The key thing to understand is in his second term, because he won re-election, because he felt he had made this brilliant comeback and now feels unconstrained by all those old elites that were constraining him in the first term, the Republican establishment, the generals. He now thinks he can act on every whim of his. And what you're seeing is what friends of his say, these are the views he's held for many years. Many of them are bizarre, inconsistent, but one of them, for example, I mean, clearly, he thinks that a great American president is somebody who adds territory to the United States, that is what you get remembered for. You know, Jefferson did the Louisiana Purchase. McKinley got Puerto Rico and the Philippines and Hawaii. He wants to do something like that. And so the strange element to the Trump foreign policy is there's nobody stopping him. There's nobody saying to him, Mr. President, have you thought this through? What do we actually gain? We're going to wreck our alliances with Europe. For what? For a piece of frigid real estate that we can't do very much with. Frankly, the Congress should be talking to him. This is a major American initiative that would require congressional authorization. Congress has collapsed. The courts should be reining him in. These tariffs are plainly unconstitutional. So what you see is, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but this is why Lord Acton had that wonderful line, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You get unconstrained. There's a kind of mad king element to some of the things Trump is doing because they're whimsical and nobody is telling him the emperor has no clothes.
Very interestingly put, because there's this whole notion about Donroe Doctrine. Monroe's doctrine, from where it comes, had a very clear strategic agenda, seemingly a sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. With Donald Trump, you never know, is he serious, for example, about Greenland? Does he really want to take over Greenland, or simply put a gun on the head of his NATO allies? I mean, Denmark is your ally, and you're taking territory away from there. Is there, I come back to it, any clear method that you see in this Donroe Doctrine? Is he going to spread across the Western Hemisphere, Cuba, Colombia, after Venezuela? Is he serious about Greenland?
Again, what you see is some kind of impulses, but to call them a strategy, to look at them as a doctrine, I think is a mistake because they don't have that rationality. So you look at, as you say, the Donroe Doctrine. The U.S. should be dominant in the Western Hemisphere. That is a remarkable shrinkage of American power and influence. The United States is the global hegemon. The United States has interests far flung across the world. To shrink them to the Western Hemisphere is bizarre, and the Western Hemisphere is not an area where the United States' crucial economic and strategic interests lie. The United States trades much more with Europe than it does with the Western Hemisphere. Its economic interests are anchored in Europe. Its future economic interests are probably anchored in Asia. You could make a case, for example, that the United States maintaining a strong strategic relationship with India is going to be far more important to its future than what it does in Venezuela. But Trump has kind of gotten into his head that, oh, there's oil in Venezuela. I mean, again, the facts don't bear any of this out. The oil in Venezuela is complex, dirty, hard to extract. As an oil executive said to me, an American oil executive, he said, Fareed, let me put it to you simply. It costs us about $80 to extract Venezuelan oil. The oil price right now is $60. That math tells you nobody is going to invest in the Venezuelan oil industry because you're not going to sell oil at a $20 loss. But again, for Trump, it's all these instincts, impulses, emotions.
So Venezuela is about the oil, or the perceived notion that you
Correct.
can control oil. Greenland presumably is a piece of land that you want to send out a message that I want to add a piece of land to America. You've got a situation where with Iran, there seems to be a sense of an ideological adversary, if at all Trump sees it as that. You're saying each of these adventures or misadventures should be seen very differently. There's no universal value attached to what Donald Trump wants to do.
Absolutely. You put it exactly right. It's a series of disconnected, often quite bizarre impulses. And, to try to claim that there is some coherence or strategy to it is to dignify it with much greater intelligence or kind of a sense of, a worked out philosophy than Trump has. He has instincts, he has emotions, he has impulses, and in some cases, as you said, there's a personal interest which is very strong. I mean, the reason he likes the Gulf states is because they have lots of money, and he's dazzled by that. He loves the idea of dealing with rich people. Even here in Davos, I mean, as you know, it's full of fascinating people who are social entrepreneurs, journalists, thought leaders. The only people Donald Trump is going to meet are rich people. He has one reception, and guess what it's called? The CEO reception.
And the rich are supplicating. The American rich are also supplicating before Donald Trump. You would have thought there would be some kind of a pushback. That's not happening. It almost seems as if large parts of the world have accepted the idea that Donald Trump can decide what he wants to do come tomorrow. There's a fear factor.
Look, what was happening with American business is very sad. One of the things that I notice, the India I grew up in, Rajdeep, that you grew up in, any businessman who wanted to have a good relationship, wanted to be profitable, successful, number one thing was you had to have a good relationship with the government. When I got to America, one of the things I was delighted by was businessmen didn't care who the president was. They didn't care who the government was. Some of them liked him, some of them didn't like him. They could just go about their business. Trump has reinserted the American political system and the office of the presidency into the economy in such a strong way, right? He picks winners, he picks losers, he invests money, he takes a cut. He is doing the kind of interventionism in the economy that, frankly, Indira Gandhi did in the 1970s. And the fact that American businesses are going along with it, well, look, part of it is that for the same reason they did in India in the 70s. They're scared out of their wits because he can turn on them. And when he turns on them, he destroys them.
In fact, someone on the flight with me, a businessman said America is trying to catch up with India and learn everything they once sort of looked down upon India as doing. But, Fareed, are you saying that here is someone who doesn't care about an alliance like NATO, doesn't care about these relationships that have been struck over decades? He's ready to upend NATO. Is that the kind of, or possibly even do a deal tomorrow with China, which could have implications for India? Are you saying he's that transactional that there is absolutely nothing that makes him realize the follies of some of these decisions?
Look, the only thing that seemed to have stopped him in the first term were these guardrails of, Republican foreign policy elites, congressional elites who pushed back. He seems to have always had these instincts. And if you look even further back, Rajdeep, as a businessman, he was very transactional. He was the kind of businessman who, when he saw he had leverage, he squeezed you until he could get the best deal from you, force you to, and if it forced you into bankruptcy, he didn't care. Most American businessmen I've met who have built great businesses believe that is the absolute wrong way to do business, because your business is not built on transactions, it's built on relationships. It's built on long-term relationships that provide enduring value. But that is not how Trump sees the world. And by the way, that's why he never built an enduring business. That's why his businesses went out bankrupt 6 times. That's why, what he had was a kind of shell company licensing deal.
But in a sense, therefore, instead of making America great again, could he, as some columnists suggest, make China great again at the moment? The world is now looking at China with new eyes because they want to de-risk from the United States. And who knows, tomorrow, China could do what America did with Venezuela, with Taiwan. Are these real fears that what you're seeing in Trump's inconsistencies, his follies, is for countries like China, in a way, to perhaps only increase their sphere of influence? Should that be a concern to the world at large, that as America's power in a strange way diminishes, China's rises?
There's no question that the greatest beneficiary of the Trump foreign policy is China. Look at what happened last week, where Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, arguably America's closest ally, goes to China because he has to. He needs markets. He needs investment because Donald Trump has turned Canada into an economic enemy. And the Canadians are looking now for new markets. They have to diversify. the Canadian foreign minister put it very well. She said, for the last 30 or 40 years, our strategy was very clear. Integration with the U.S. at every level, diplomatic, political, economic. Now their strategy is, she says, in the next 10 years, we have to do massive diversification away from America. And I would argue that is becoming a mantra that you are hearing almost everywhere. People are saying, as you put it, de-risk from America, diversify away from America. Everyone is going to have to deal with America. The United States is too strong. It's too big a market. It's too dominant a political, military player. But everyone now regards America as a problem to be managed, and they will go about doing their own thing, trying to find new markets, forging new trade deals. The interesting thing is, while Trump is being protectionist and nationalist, other countries are reaching out and doing more free trade with one another, finding ways of cooperating with one another. So for the first time in my lifetime, the United States is no longer setting the agenda for the world. The U.S. is doing its thing, protectionism, nationalism, Other countries have to manage that. The U.S. is too large. But look at what Europe is doing. They signed a free trade deal with Mercosur. They're going to sign a free trade deal, I guarantee you, in 2 or 3 weeks with India.
That's right.
They're going to sign one with Southeast Asia. The Brazilians are searching for ways to expand trade. The Africans are searching for ways to do more trade. Modi has done more reforms in India as a response to Trump's tariffs. So in a strange way, everyone is treating the U.S. like the kind of crazy parent you have to deal with, but no one is listening. No one is following its lead. And that loss of the agenda-setting power of America, the soft power, is very, very meaningful.
But I'll come to India in a moment. Europe is threatening trade bazookas and counter tariff measures on America. Are we heading in that sense for a tariff war? We are already seeing elements of that, but could we be heading for a full-blown tariff war? And will Donald Trump chicken out, or is he going to stick to the line of confronting Europe in particular?
You never know with Trump, but one of the things that has become clear is that he clearly chickened out many times in the trade deals, right? Every time the numbers, he'd proposed numbers, the markets would go down, he'd chicken out. But then when he was told this, again, you're seeing this is one very emotional, thin-skinned man. He got outraged. And so for the next few months, he stopped chickening out because he realized people were noticing that, and he didn't like that reputation. So with Trump, it's always fluid. He could back down, we don't know. But what we do know is, as I said, he doesn't seem to like his liberal democratic allies. He doesn't respect them. He doesn't honor his commitments to them. Who he likes are the autocrats.
Vladimir Putin, who I was going to... there seems to be...
And the Gulf states, he likes these guys he can cut deals with.
So where does that leave the war in Ukraine, which shows no signs of ending? Where does that leave an increasingly unstable Middle East, where you've got the Saudis and the Emiratis also in conflict with each other, Iran unstable, Donald Trump threatening Tehran by the day? Are we heading, therefore, in 2026 to a scenario of even more conflicts, a perpetual conflict, in a sense?
I think we are moving into a world that is much more volatile. I can't remember, 15 years ago now, I wrote a book called The Post-American World.
Yes.
And the driver of that world, I argued, was the fact that basically the emerging markets over the last 30 years had gone from roughly 5% of GDP to roughly 50% of GDP, and that this was a seismic historical shift in the world that hadn't happened in 500 years. What I didn't know that accelerating that trend was going to be the United States abdicating its role as the great stabilizer of the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. So I think, yes, we are going to see a much more volatile world because everywhere America's stabilizing role is going to be questioned, right? The Asians are going to say, are America's guarantees really solid? If you look at how he treats the Europeans, is he going to honor his commitments to Japan, to South Korea, to Australia? When I was in Australia last year, this was already the single biggest worry they had. When you look at the Middle East, you don't understand. Is he going to be for Syria forever, or is he going to change his mind on that? Is he, going to bomb Iran, or one day he talks about making a deal with Iran? And of course, in Europe, you see that his commitments are clearly not solid. And with Ukraine, you asked what is going to happen. I worry a great deal because Trump's basic strategy on Ukraine has been to side with Russia and to say, let's force Ukraine to accept all the concessions, and that way we'll get a peace. And then I'll get my Nobel Peace Prize. You might have noticed he's obsessed.
Yeah, he's
with
obsessed
this.
with the Nobel Peace Prize. He's blaming the Norwegians now for not giving him the Nobel Peace Prize. But it's not even a multipolar world then. You know,
No.
this Trumpian world order, let's not call it a post-Trumpian, but this Trumpian world order is not even multipolar because
No,
the main
no.
pole, America, is itself, as you said, abdicating its responsibility.
Exactly. This is why I called it a post-American world, because I thought about calling it a multipolar world, but you're right, it's not. The US is still the dominant power, and even though China is number 2, China has many reasons why it's not going to be an alternative.
It's not a G2 world.
It's not, because the Chinese don't have a rival reserve currency, for example, and they never will, because they won't open up their, at least not in the next 25 years, they won't open up their system to to free flows of currency. They're not that kind of open society, political system. They cause enormous suspicion from their neighbors. They're not a natural leader in that way. Russia is a one-dimensional power. All it has really is the army. Other than that, it's a collapsing economy. It's a gas station with an army. So Europe cannot unify. So we live in this strange world where the United States, which was the great stabilizer, is taking its marbles and sitting, pouting. Everybody else is trying to freelance, but no one has the capacity to fill the gaps. And that's why I worry that there will be greater instability, volatility, and perhaps even war.
So where does India then fit into this? We are one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing economy, large economy in the world at the moment. How should India deal with the Donald Trump? Just shut off the noise? Is that possible at all, given the fact that we now don't even know whether a trade deal will happen with the United States? How should India deal with this face of Donald Trump 2.0?
Look, at the broad macro level, what India should recognize is time is on its side. India has been doing extremely impressively economically, and this is basically, at this point, is fair to say, is a 25-year story. India has been progressing. If you look at the numbers under the Manmohan Singh government and the Narendra Modi government, they're actually roughly the same. Yes. Per capita GDP growth is about the same. And what's important now is there is a certain critical mass that has been reached. And 20 years of growth means in year 18, 19, 20, for example, the government has revenues of really substantial size. So you see that in the infrastructure build out. And Modi has been a very good manager of the economy in most ways. So I think all of that, just keep doing, focus on modernizing the economy, modernizing the society. India has a huge advantage. Most of its economy is domestic economy. Most of its economy is a consumption-based economy. Most people don't realize this is very rare. India and the US actually, I think, and Indonesia are the only countries where consumption as a share of GDP is over 60%. In China, I think it's 30, 35%. So all those countries rely on exports to fuel their economy. India doesn't. India relies on internal consumption. Now, you do want exports because they are high value, they support high-paying jobs, they take you to the frontiers of technology. So continue trying to move in that direction as much as you can. The iPhone story in India is a remarkable story, from zero to now supplying 45% of America's smartphones. Continue along those lines. Continue along, EV lines. On the foreign policy side, have patience. Trump is volatile. Trump is idiosyncratic. And, to the extent you can, as I've often said, manage him. Try to humor him. Try to find, if the guy likes big fancy state dinners, throw him a big fancy state dinner at Rashtrapati Bhavan, which, by the way, is 4 times the size of Buckingham Palace. And well, they had a few hundred horses out there. India could have a few thousand elephants. You could have the Maharajas and Maharanis. If the government is lacking any initiative or imagination, I would call the Ambanis and ask them how to throw a nice party that will impress the world. Play along with that, because he clearly, as I say, he is
a narcissist,
and he likes being the king. So treat him like that. And if you can get a good trade deal out of it, great. But, mostly have the patience to know that you're not going to die one way. This is not a make or break for India. It's not going to kill India. But don't give up the courtship because, honestly, India needs the deal more than America does. The Indian economy has almost no impact on America. It's a pimple on the giant. But America does have an impact because America is going to be the force that helps India move up the value chain in terms of technology, in terms of economy, in terms of the kind of industries. India should be aspiring to be at the frontier of technology, not just doing cheap labor stuff. And to do that, you need a partnership with America.
But should we be worried when a Donald Trump is seen to court Pakistan, for example? Or Pakistan is seen to court Donald Trump, to put it more accurately. Should we be worried that this severely affects our strategic interests when he goes around the world and says, I brokered the ceasefire between India and Pakistan after Operation Sindoor? Or should we just treat it as background noise of someone, as you said, the idiosyncrasies of Donald Trump?
Look, I think that I look at it at two levels. One, look at the idiosyncrasies. And, frankly, Vajpayee would often have some formula by which he would say, we thank the Americans for their good offices in this matter. There's no reason to also get your back up so much that you absolutely refuse to acknowledge any involvement in the U.S. I think that's also a little bit unnecessary. I understand Modi has political pressures, but there's a way to have handled that. In the broader sense, yes, it's a worry. But again, why does Trump like Pakistan? Because, as I said, he loves autocrats. And Munir presented himself in exactly the terms that Trump likes. I am the guy who runs Pakistan. We will do anything you want. I can have you nominated for the Nobel Prize. I can have a crypto council deal done with your son's company. India doesn't operate like that. It's a serious democracy. And so that is you could put it as a disadvantage. I would say in the long run, it's a huge advantage that India has. But don't worry, have patience.
Because you say have patience. There are those who say do what the Chinese did, stare him down when he imposes tariffs on you, and eventually Trump has to come to the table and make a truce with China. Should India stare down Donald Trump?
No. Trump has one quality, and he's very intelligent about this. He knows when he has leverage and when he doesn't. So he pushes countries hard when he knows that there's an asymmetry of power. Mm-hmm. And with China, he knew that the Chinese were very powerful. They had things they could withhold, which would tank the U.S. economy. India does not have that power with the U.S. right now. And just making grand speeches about it and bloviating, that's not the right path.
We shouldn't be worried about H-1B visas, the way the MAGA coalition looks at Indian Americans.
You should be worried. There is a sea change taking place in the attitude, not of America, of the MAGA coalition about Indians in particular. And, that's a separate issue which that has to be dealt with. All I'm saying is, but don't threaten when you don't have the leverage. Right. Build up the leverage, and then when you do have cards to play, fine, play them. Don't bluff. He's very good at figuring that out.
So my final part of this is, we're in January of 26 here in Davos. Looks lovely. The sun is out. Will we see tough times in the next 12 months? We're already seeing markets getting more and more volatile, uncertainty in the air. Will we continue to see this uncertainty as long as Donald Trump is in the White House? Do you think anything can check him? The November midterm elections are not too long away in America. Is there any check at all that you see in the near future?
Look, you could imagine checks if he loses both the House and the Senate. Then I think you have a very substantial check that will come into place. The courts may check him. They have checked him in small ways in certain places. What's striking to me is public opinion is not checking him right now. He's quite unpopular. His approval rating is only 39%. I think that the last CNN poll I saw, 58% of Americans thought that his first year had been a failure. On Greenland, 75% of Americans are opposed. Now, Rajdeep, in the last 10 years, we've been very polarized. I can't remember 75% of Americans agreeing on what day it is. So this is very unusual that he's not backing down on issues that are not popular. So I can't promise you that. What I can tell you is, and with markets, you never know. Look, I never make macroeconomic predictions because the economy, particularly the American economy, is a $30-odd trillion beast. There are 5,000 variables going on. AI could be such a game changer that it lifts all boats. Oil might come down so much that it provides another fillip. But I think what you will see is uncertainty, you will see volatility, and you will see around the world people feeling they cannot rely on the United States, that they have to diversify away from it. And that is a huge shift after 80 years of consistent foreign policy. So that does mean we are entering a new world.
He's offering us a place on the board of peace on Gaza, for example, at $1 billion. Is that something that India should look at seriously, this board of peace for Gaza?
I myself don't see how it's going to make much progress. But, if it creates another point of leverage and it creates a point of contact and communication with Trump, it might be worthwhile.
Pay him $1 billion to become a board member. I mean, the
I'd
very thought of a private board.
I hope the money is going to the people of Gaza, though that has not been clarified. I think if it was pay him $1 billion, of course you shouldn't do it. But if it's toward reconstruction of Gaza, maybe. I mean, God knows they need the money.
Net, therefore, Fareed, as someone who's tracked foreign policy for decades, have you seen a moment quite like this in following it as an academic, as a media person? Have you ever seen times like this? Is this in a way the final rupturing of the post-World War II order, that there was perhaps some belief that it was almost inevitable that someone like Trump would come and say, would rupture it sooner rather than later?
I think this is the big rupture. This is the most dramatic moment I have seen in international relations. It wasn't inevitable. That's the sad thing is, this was a remarkably stable system. You had the richest country in the world with the largest army in the world by far, and that was not seen as threatening to the other richest countries in the world, like Germany and Japan. This is a unique historical phenomenon. It has never happened before, that you have so much power, and yet people aren't threatened by you. They want you to lead. The United States is squandering what was really once in a lifetime opportunity, once in a millennium opportunity, and for what? To get Greenland?
And you might lose jobs as a result. There are signs of the American economy now stuttering. It's done better. It's been more resilient than many thought. But jobs could be lost as well. So all of this could possibly rein in Donald Trump or not.
Look, in the long run, so the problem is a lot of the checks and a lot of the costs of a lot of what Trump is doing, like tariffs. And we know this, again, growing up in India under very high tariffs. It doesn't happen instantly. It happens over time. The economy becomes slightly less productive. Then, then there's more and more corruption because the politics becomes more important, and who you know in Washington to get this exemption and that exemption. All these things add to the complexity and the corruption of the economy. It doesn't happen tomorrow. But what I can say is, look, fundamentally, the United States is 4% of the world's population. It's 25% of the world economy. You have to deal with the rest of the world. I mean, that's 96% of the world and 75% of the world economy that you're alienating.
I look forward to you writing a book on this Trumpian world order, and maybe a chapter looking at what Trump has learned or unlearned from India and the Indian years. But Fareed, pleasure having you here in Davos. I'm told that before you always come a day early so that you can ski. That's the one time, I guess, in these quiet mountains you get away from all the noise of television news, because you never know with Donald Trump what happens the next day.
Completely true, but it's a wonderful way to get over jet lag. And so after doing this, I think this is like my 28th Davos. After about 20 years of doing it, I said to myself, I'm going to get out of the conference room and get onto the ski slopes, and it's proved to be my magic method of curing jet lag.
It's also a magic method of getting over Trumpianism. You can just be away from all the noise. Yes. Wonderful to have you here joining us on this Davos brainstorm. Thank you so much for doing this. Now, all eyes in Davos, in a way, are on the US President Donald Trump, but there is another elephant in the room, or should we say dragon in the room, and that's China. What China does or doesn't do in the next 12 months could also determine the trajectory of geoeconomics and geopolitics and affect the world and India too. To get a Beijing perspective, I'm joined by a special guest now. Guan Xin is an anchor with Global Chinese Television Network and also the Chief Business News Editor at CGTN. Appreciate your joining us there, Guan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Just want to get a sense. A lot of attention, as I said, on Donald Trump. How does China see Donald Trump today and what he's done over the last 12 months? The tariff war and then the tariff truce with Beijing. Is he also seen by China as someone who's disrupting the world order?
It's a difficult question. Well, I think China and the United States having one of the most important relationships in the world, and China as a very responsible, big power. China and the U.S. share the same responsibility to properly handle any kind of frictions or disagreements between China and the United States. Of course, last year we had this tariff war, which indeed created a lot of disruptions for China's economy, but China has managed to navigate through this intense period. And I think the two sides have a truce in October last year, and that is a testament that confrontation between the two largest economies of the world serves neither side's interests. And we are committed to and foster a mutually beneficial relationships with the United States because it is not only in the interest of the two countries, but also it goes a long way to provide more certainty for the global economy and creates more certainties for global businesses and bring stability to the world economy.
It's almost as if you're talking about G2, the US and China. In a sense, you're talking about cooperation more than competition at the moment. Right. But the world doesn't see it as that. The world sees China pushing back. Every time the US pushed at China, China's pushed back. You have this huge advantage of rare earth minerals, and you've used and leveraged that to push back. Is that the Chinese approach? We're not going to be bullied by Donald Trump.
I think you're absolutely right. We are not going to be bullied by a country that is using strength to pressure others. But I think China's countermeasures are legitimate and proportionate, and it aims to, it does not aim to escalate the tensions. We are still fully committed to resolving our differences through mutually beneficial consultations, and we have established this working group with the United States and keep the communications going. So I think ultimately China hopes to foster a mutually constructive relationship with the United States.
You know what's fascinating, one, is that China registered a trade surplus of 1.2 trillion in 2025 despite the Trump tariffs. And there is one view or a criticism of sort of China, that China is using low-cost exports to dump them across the world to, in a way, transform the way it negotiates with other countries. Is that how China sees its future? If America engages in these tariff wars, China will use the opportunity to strike deals with other countries, including India, to China's advantage through low-cost exports.
Thank you for the question. Actually, a trade surplus is not the policy objective of China. China is committed to pursue balanced trade with our major trading partners.
But that's not happening. I mean, the reality is that you've got huge trade surpluses with large parts of the world, including India.
Yeah. That is unexpected last year because due to the tariff war, we didn't expect such robust performance of China's foreign trade sector. But I think there is a combination of factors are at play here. For example, China's continued investment in its manufacturing, especially high-end manufacturing capabilities and innovation-driven strategies are really, increase the competitive edge about China's export sector. There are some stereotype about China's products being cheap, but actually, China is not the source of those low-end manufacturing products. Many companies have moved these supply chains outside of China because of China's rising labor costs. But China has advantages in more skilled labor, more integrated supply chain system, and an ecosystem of high-end manufacturing. And as we have the talent dividend, we have the world's largest number of engineers, and that has really contributed to the competitiveness of China's export sector. But I have to stress that China also introduced a lot of measures to expand its imports with its trading partners. China's imports remains the world's second largest for 17 consecutive years, and China is actively expanding domestic demand, and China is hosting the China International Import Expo, and we are fully confident our consumer market, the expanding middle-income consumers will create more opportunities for global businesses, and import will continue to grow.
So you're saying China is ready to open itself up to the world, because one of the interesting aspects of this is while you have this huge trade surplus, while China becomes a dominant player in supply link chains, in particular in manufacturing, innovation, information technology, AI, at the same time Chinese domestic demand has been tepid, consumer spending has been tepid, you still have a property crisis, your population has slowed down, you've got a lot of challenges at home. Isn't that true? Is there a recognition of that China has now, in a sense, got to almost reboot itself for the next, if it has to move forward and grow faster?
You're absolutely correct about your observation about Chinese economy. Indeed, we're having some structural issues about the economy, and actually it's very difficult to navigate China's economy, which is now at a huge size compared to like a decade ago. However, we have fully recognized these challenges, like we are actively expanding our domestic demand, and we're trying to invest in human capital and increase the household incomes, create more social security net for them. These measures are aiming at long-term rebalancing of Chinese economy, and that can foster sustainable growth momentum going forward. Meanwhile, you mentioned those new growth areas. Indeed, we're investing heavily on green industries, the artificial intelligence sectors, and we hope these areas will generate more growth avenues for the economy. So, as the country is overcoming the so-called middle-income trap.
It's interesting you mentioned at the outset that you don't see Donald Trump in the United States as an adversary. How do you see India? The two big powers in a way of the region, the relationship between the two countries has been blow hot, blow cold over the years. We've had border disputes with China. How do you see it from Beijing? How do you see New Delhi? Do you see India as a partner with alliances possibly like BRICS getting strengthened over the next decade?
I think definitely India is a very important partner of China. We have to admit there are some frictions or even some disputes. It is very normal because we're now one of the major economies in the world. However, I think the common interest between our nations far exceeded those disagreements, and we will continue to we're making efforts to continue to narrow the list of these conflicting issues. I think the shared interest between China and India are manifested in, we are important growth drivers of the world. We have, combinedly, we have 1/3 of the global population, and we are important growth drivers to the region's economy. And we are also the largest developing countries, and we're the anchors of the global south. So working together, we can also improve the voice in global governance and to reflect more of emerging markets and developing economies.
But do you see us as a competitor? Do you see India as a competitor with China, particularly in the future, let's say for supply chains? Or does China believe that it's reached a stage where India doesn't necessarily matter to the larger Chinese strategic objectives?
Of course, there will be competition, in economic theories, competitions are mostly healthy, and I think the point is we need to manage these healthy competitions instead of, escalating tensions or even politicalizing trade issues. I don't mean we're politicalizing, I mean for the world trade. It is in the interest of the nations to foster healthy competition instead of politicalize trade issues.
In conclusion, and this is from a New Delhi perspective, we look at China and we look at the way your economy has expanded over the last 3 decades. Some believe that it's because you are an authoritarian regime. The communist regime can do what other countries cannot. You can push ahead because there are no roadblocks, there are no checks and balances. But if I were to ask you, what explains the Chinese success story? What is it that makes China, according to you, such a successful powerhouse of the 21st century?
Well, it's a very difficult question, but thank you very much for that. It's a big complimentary of China's achievements in the past. I think I
mentioned the fact that from an Indian perspective, there are those who will say China's authoritarianism, and the fact that you can push ahead with
different ideologies. I totally understand.
Yeah. So what's the success? What is that secret sauce that makes China tick?
We Chinese actually think we are a very vibrant democracy. If you go to China and go to the 2 sessions at the beginning of this year, you can see thousands of experts gathered in Beijing, and they have all kinds of meetings, and they will submit their proposals about how to improve the economic governance and policies through their year-long work. Some of them are really deep-rooted in the rural areas, and they really see how China's economic policies work in rural areas, and they bring their wisdom and their contributions, and they sit together and discuss China's economic priorities. And this unity and this planning in advance and implementation really give us this long-term vision going forward. I think it is very, very unique in the world because sometimes you have the swings in politics and that's, does not align with China's value because we're really a hard-working nation and with a strong determination. So we made great changes in our economy in the past decades, and I think that is how we got here, and we'll keep going.
And so interesting, whatever Donald Trump does, many believe that actually China is a beneficiary. If you've got Russia, if you've got Europe and America clashing, if you've got America in a way alienating some of its traditional allies, China becomes the beneficiary. All kinds of countries are now coming to China to do business with China, and China's business is business. Am I correct?
We welcome international, investors.
You've signed deals with Canada, you're signing deals with more and more countries. So China is focused, in a way, of growing its influence across the world.
I think they come to China to sign deals for a reason, and that is openness and dialogue is still, the way forward. It has underpinned the prosperity of the world economy in the past decades. Right now, there are a lot of talk about fragmentation and de-risking, but the global economy is still deeply, interconnected, and China is constantly committed to, shared development and, mutually beneficial trade relationship. And so I think this value is shared by many countries, including emerging economies, developing economies, even some Western economies like Canada and Europe, as you mentioned. So it's not because China, intentionally, or it's a value, I think, and that is fundamental of global growth, and it will continue to exist in the future.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, Guan, because you've given us a business perspective of what makes that Chinese economy tick, Donald Trump or no Donald Trump. Good to have you here in conversation in Davos. It takes a Chinese and an Indian journalist to come to Davos to have a civilized conversation like this. So thank you very much for joining me and giving our viewers that viewpoint from Beijing.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity to share with you.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a break at this point. You've heard from leading global voices on how they're looking at the Trump turbulence. When we return, just a little bit more, where we look at how Indian businessmen are watching the global events unfold. Remember, markets have already crashed in India today. Back in a moment. You're watching our special coverage, Davos Brainstorm, only on India Today.
We are joined by two members of India Inc., people who've been coming to Davos for years, who understand both the vibe and the substance of what this forum discusses. Rajan Mittal, Vice Chairman of Bharti Enterprises and a former past President of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And with him, Anand Goenka. He's from RPG Group, one of the very well-known groups in the country, and currently, more importantly, the serving President of FICCI. Thank you very much for coming here. I want to begin with both of you, Anand, and right up there. The timeline for a possible trade deal with the United States has now perhaps been pushed by a quarter, but Rajdeep and I have been speaking to a lot of people from industry, and we get the sense that many people in industry are now looking beyond it. If there's a deal, fine. If there isn't, life will go on. Some sectors have taken a hit. Others are looking at even bigger opportunities. EU trade deal is around the corner. What's your own sense about this as the president of FICCI?
Absolutely. I think for the last few quarters we've been believing that the trade deal is around the corner, but it has been evading us. Clearly the government is on overdrive on FTAs with many other countries, and we are looking at diversifying trade across these new countries, whether it is New Zealand, Oman, Jordan. Recently there was a visit. EU will be a big one that comes in. There's also been a change in Indian FTAs from the developing world now to the developed world, where there is far more complementarity that is there. So even as business, we are looking at diversifying to new countries where FTAs are getting signed, and that presents a great opportunity.
In a sense, though, Mr. Mittal, is there a shadow of Donald Trump that hangs over, looms over not just Davos, in a way perhaps that you've been coming here for years, that an individual sort of looms large over this World Economic Forum and looms over Indian industry as well? We've just seen a major market crash today. The markets have tumbled and there's a sense of uncertainty. Does that concern you as we start 2026, that we are in very uncertain times and business leaders have to adjust to these uncertain times?
Rajdeep, the geopolitics is very different. The world is in influx, that's a given. The trust factors between nations, the trust factors between bilateral organizations is probably the lowest that we have seen. Having said that, I go around Europe, US, and I see the economies around. India is in a good shape. Trade deal is only one factor. We have a large domestic consumption markets. We have a government which is working very closely with the industry to ensure that the industry, grows. India is growing to 6 to 7%. Sure, now we need to grow maybe double digit, but there are issues which are not in our control. Having said that, my belief remains Indian entrepreneur is also, in that sense, very active, very agile. There has been a hit in certain sectors of the industry. US will find its own space and place, and I'm certain as an entrepreneur and as an Indian I speak, we can't compromise our nation's sovereignty in that sense, or I would say the economic sense, where there are entrepreneurs, SME, MSMEs involved, farmers involved. We have to keep that in mind, that any trade deal that happens must be that way equitable.
It's not affecting business confidence, this constant uncertainty. Now it's Europe versus the US. We don't know what Donald Trump will do next. Is it affecting business confidence in India, or do you believe India's fundamentals are so strong in your view that we shouldn't be worried about the world around us?
No, I wouldn't say that. As I said, the influx is there, so there is always an uncertainty, and we cannot be bereft of that uncertainty. So yes, it does impact the growth, the capex spending, all that impacts. But also we have to, life has to go on. We have to ensure that whatever the issues which are with a particular country, they're being managed. Will it happen tomorrow? Will it happen in 3 months? I think Indian industry is taken into this stride that it will happen, but probably timing nobody knows. Sure enough, the Europe-US challenges as we are seeing, we hope that they do not, go through a much larger situation. So the world must remain calm. Otherwise, there will be an uncertainty. That is a given, and that does impact industry in India and across the globe.
Rajan and Anand, thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Rajdeep. With that, it's a wrap. We'll be back with more. Until then, goodbye.